Hello, hello. Happy Friday, everybody. Sorry if my voice sounds a little odd. The mic's on an odd place because this guitar strap is in an odd place because I'm playing a somewhat odd guitar. We'll get to that though. But Kai, Dylan, Tazi, Dave, yo, what's up, everybody? Like I said, happy Friday. It's been a couple weeks, as it always has been, for every Friday live stream. So yeah, it's the weekend it's the eve of the weekend. I know we're all stoked for that. And we have a bunch of cool stuff to talk about. Those of you who regularly tune into the live streams will know that this is usually a duo. Yes, I have indeed been abandoned, although don't rub it in too hard because Joe feels bad enough already. But he is not able to be here today. Those of you who regularly watch the live stream will know that this is typically a duo situation. Joe was not able to join me, Mr. Joseph Balaguer, the man, the myth, and the legend. I should probably take this opportunity to say a bunch of hilarious things about him while he's not here to chastise me. You know, he's smart, he's handsome, his designs are good. What more can you say, you know? Brought us all together in the world of Balaguer. Ken, yo, full stack. Yeah, we can definitely chat about that today too. Joe is now 2 speakers. Yes, Joe has actually just, it's like Animorphs, but instead of an animal, he became an orange full stack with black trim instead of the orange trim. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about tone wood. We'll get into all of that. We'll do a little bit of catching up and then we'll get into tone wood stuff. This is a stream that I've wanted to do for a while. We sort of did a light version of this before we were even in this space back in the day. And it's a fun conversation, not just because it's incendiary. Go into any forum, anywhere, at any time. Someone will be having the debate of tone wood with someone else. So there have been some videos posted over the last 6 months to a year that I think have reignited that conversation, stoked the flames, if you will. Some, including myself, would say that some of those videos dug too deep and too greedily and then found nothing but smoke, shadow, fire. But we're going to clear a bunch of that stuff up today. So not too bad. Kai says, Jake asked for a full stack and monkey's paw curled. Yeah. So Dave, but what about wood tone? See? Now there's a thing, because if we're going to talk about tone wood tone, especially after we had our fun buzzword conversation, that is in fact the tone descriptor, woody, wooden tone. And no, it does not mean literally like the tone of a sound of wood. It's an adjective that is, although all tone is tied to the guitar itself, woody does not necessarily mean it sounds like the wood of the guitar. It means woody, which is a fun one to describe. We'll have to, maybe we'll hit that one up later. Mario, who dis? Where's Jake? I hope I don't look too unfamiliar. I have noticed lately that I am in, it's like creamy. Yeah, that's true. Idioms. Yes, exactly. Our life in idiom. If you're as big a fan of Archer as I am, I think, did I talk about that on the last podcast? I think I did. That hilarious joke about like how you basically can't speak a language without speaking in idioms, especially if that language is English. Oh, no hat. Yeah, so I'm so due for a haircut. And I need to shave really bad too. I'm just gonna pile it on while I'm here. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of like, my hair does the curly thing. So no hat today because I was like, we'll see what's up. Plus it's like 90 degrees in Pennsylvania right now. So the hat, while nice for sweat wicking, not so nice for staying as cool as no hat. So there's my explanation, or excuse, if you will. Archer rocks. Yes, it does. If a tone wood toned wood, oh wow. If a tone wood toned wood tone. That's a good question. I like that. Put that on a fretboard, custom inlay. So if you've been following us lately, you will have seen a very cool thing. We talked about it in the last live stream because we had just released it. Devin Scheidegger of the Acacia strain and Balaguer relation has a new signature model, a DS7. It's a Diablo 7-string. That's tricked out. He went for all the top tier specs. It's really built to be like a premium. You really couldn't add anything else to it other than like what you might want. Sorry, I turned Australian for a second there. what you might want aesthetically, subjectively. It's super sick. They are available for pre-order now. You can go to the website, check out the spec and all that stuff. That is all there. All the other pre-orders are still available too, like the Mitch 6 and then the new Standard Series and Select Series stuff, all of which is completing very soon and will be shipping to us very soon. It is ocean freight, some of it, so it takes like 4 to 6 weeks to get here. But that stuff should be shipping in July, August. So if you want to get in now. Some of them are already sold out, and the others likely will be soon because there are not very many left of any of them. I would order one if I hadn't already ordered a tricked out Diablo. Fair enough. I also sort of like already have my 7-string, so I kind of don't really need it, but it is so sick, and Devin's been playing it on tour, and we've got to hear it, and it is, boy, it is massive sounding. It's very cool. It's I would say it's a more aggressive sound than his Typhons and his Tartari, where it's definitely slightly clearer, and I think it lends to this clarity in the sound that makes it very just powerful. It's like getting hit with a sledgehammer to be specific. James, yo, I feel we get caught up on the idea of tone wood or pickups or the amp that changes the tone, but the combination of everything creates your tone. That's a great segue and is absolutely true. So today we're going to talk about tone wood. We may as well jump in now because this could be a 2-hour, 3-hour, 2-week-long conversation if we wanted it to be. And spoiler alert, the end of this conversation is exactly what you just said. I completely agree. I think people do get very hung up on very specific things when in reality, everything matters, but nothing matters so much individually that it is the only thing that matters. Everything matters. It all adds up. You know, your tone is the sum of its parts, right? It's not one particular thing. There are things that have a greater impact on your tone, such as your general body wood choice, your pickups, your amp, the things that have a big impact on your tone. We all know what those things are. And then there are smaller things. Usually it is literally by size. So for instance, your tuners, while they do make a difference, because everything makes a difference, are not going to make the same difference as the wood of the guitar or your amp. You know, your fingerboard is not going to make as much a difference as the neck wood will, because it just doesn't, by volume, it is not affecting the sound as much. But they all do have an effect, and we're going to get into the specifics. I would encourage you, those cool enough to be in the Balaguer chat this Friday live stream, because you are all cool. I would encourage you to drop any questions you have, drop any comments you have, hot takes. I'm just going to go down the list with comments, so I'm not going to skip any today, because the truth is there is a right answer in terms of, do tone woods exist and do they affect things? The answer is yes. I'll just rip that Band-Aid off right now. But how much they affect things and what you can do to either enhance or mitigate the effect of the wood of the guitar and other things in your signal chain, you know, vary. You can tweak everything to make it sound as little like the wood as possible, or as most like the wood. You can lean into the wood you have, or you can pair it with something that's totally opposite so that you're making something sound more like something else, or finding a unique voice in the middle, which is something that I've been very happy with, of finding the right wood combinations. It's a lifelong journey, but it's fun to do. And I'll talk about my own preferences. You know, I'll just claim them, of course, because it's all subjective. But yeah, I think it's a fun conversation to have, and it's something that is both important and not important, which is, I think, part B in the conclusion of this. Beyond everything matters is that also nothing matters, and we'll get to that part too, not to be too cryptic about it. But I'm going to hit some comments to start us off. Kai said, we all agree tone wood is a significant thing for acoustics. Why doesn't anyone care about how their electric guitar sounds acoustically? That's a good one. So obviously, if you play two identical acoustic guitars and one has a Sitka spruce top with a mahogany body, or one has a maple top with a maple body, that's something that some builders do. But like, let's say you have the same body and side woods, but you're changing just the top. The resonance of the top is what makes the acoustic guitar sound that way. And everything from the internal bracing of the guitar itself, even if everything is the same, to the wood choices change the way that the acoustic guitar sounds. There are people out there who will say, oh, well, that's different. It affects the way that the air moves inside of the guitar versus an electric where it's not doing that. It's not moving air in the same way to project the sound. Therefore, the woods don't matter. And there is something in this, which is that if you just look at it, if you take it at face value, if you just look at it on the surface, it's easy to say, oh, well, the wood is just holding the pickups, which is just picking up the vibration of the string, which is then out of the guitar and outside of like the literal wires and the output jack and the cable capacitance and blah, 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 which we can get into later. Outside of all that, it is really just the pickup doing the work. And like fundamentally, sure, I guess you could make that case, but the vibration does affect the sound, meaning the quality of the vibration, the type of the vibration, the density of the wood, all of those things affect not only, you're not affecting the electromagnetic field with the wood because it doesn't heed things like wood. So the pickup's electromagnetic field is not affected. However, the transmission of those vibrations, the things that end up making it out of the guitar, they do matter. They do make a difference. There is a difference. It is a measurable difference. It is an audible difference. Even if that difference is literally just like, it could be 1% or less than 1% in some cases. It could also be much larger depending on how similar the wood choices are. And not just for acoustics, for electrics as well. I wish I had 2 identical guitars to do this, although we have done this before in previous live streams, I think from way back in the day where we played identical guitars that just had different neck woods or something. I forget what it was, but we have done it. And it does make a difference. But that's an interesting point, Kai. And I do think, there is something to be said for the difference in acoustic and electric and how the woods affect the sound, because the woods in an acoustic are doing different things. Or I should say doing additional things that the woods and the electric are not doing, but they both still impact the sound. There's just no doubt about it. Dave says, I'm going to be devil's advocate here. Tone is mostly your fingers and pickups. Interesting. So what I will say is that the pickups do make a big difference. There was a video done so I recently saw John Brown did a video on pickups. I haven't watched the video yet, I have to say, but it is saved in my watch later. John Brown, I love it because it's scientific. It's really well done, but his conclusions are also very down to earth, where it's like, oh, you can see all this stuff on an oscilloscope or on an EQ chart, but that doesn't necessarily mean you feel the difference or even hear it in the room. And I like his approach to that stuff, and I want to watch it. But what's interesting about that, I think, is tone is largely not in your fingers, but the way that your tone sounds is. Meaning, sitting in a room, the classic example, right, is Ted Nugent, who's a massive asshole. Ted Nugent and Eddie Van Halen are on the same tour. They play each other's rigs, true story. And Ted sounds like Ted through Eddie's rig, and Eddie sounds like Eddie through Ted's rig, right? Like, your touch matters. It does matter. The way you vibrato, how hard you hold the string, the way you pick, the pick you use, which I see a comment, and we'll get to that in a second. All of that stuff impacts the sound, whether everything else is the same. You could give the exact same everything to 2 different players, and if they've developed any style whatsoever, it is not going to sound like the same player, first off, which is kind of the easy one. But the tone is also not going to be the same because the touch is different. The way they hit the string, even if they're using the same pick, is different. The way they hold the pick, the way they fret with their left hand, all of those things do affect the sound. I don't really know how else to say it. And it is interesting, and that's a cool point, because I do think that people like to say, oh, tone's in the hands, man, like tone's in the fingers. 9 times out of 10, it's someone talking out their ass who has no idea what they're talking about. But the kernel of truth that those same 9 out of 10 people are hitting on is touch is all in the hands. It's the style of the player, the way you approach the instrument, and that can have a dramatic effect on the way something sounds. So they're both right and wrong. Like we were saying earlier, and like we'll continue to say, it's the sum of its parts. You know, you put a blues player through a driftwood amp, they're still going to sound like a blues player, but those two things aren't elevating the sound in the same way that if you run a brown protein into a plexi, that might fit that sound better, and so it might sound better to more players. A lot of that is subjective. There are blues players who play through Soldanos and Bogners. You know, there are hard rock players who play through, you know, and metal players who play through Fender combos with distortion pedals in front. There's no hard and fast rule. It's whatever works. Similar to theory, which, oh boy, we're crossing the streams now. Knowing theory doesn't make you a sterile guitar player. Not knowing theory doesn't make you have better feel. It's all about how you use it. It's all about the sum of its parts, like we keep saying. And then the pickups thing, I think that's low-hanging fruit, right? Because a lot of people say that the pickups are the only thing that affect the sound. It's such a common thing that I joked about it in our Balaguer Facebook discussion group post earlier, where I was like, you know, some people say it's all in the pickups. And while it isn't, it does have, it's one of those things that has a very large effect on the sound. As Kai loves to tease me about, I often change pickups. I've changed pickups in the same guitar with multiple guitars so many times that even if you adjust pickup heights to make up for differences in output and sort of warmth and overall clarity, pickups sound different. Magnet type, the wind, all of that affect the sound. That is a huge part of the sound because most of the signal being sent is generated by the motion of the string, which is creating the signal, the actual electrical signal that is picked up by the magnetic field of the pickups, which is coils around a magnet, right? Electromagnetism out to the output, sent through the cable to the whatever then amplifies the signal. And the pickups do have a huge impact on the sound. They are not the end-all be-all. It is not the only thing that affects tone, but it is very important, and it is a big part of the sound. I mean, you could put the same pickup, like for instance, neck pickup versus bridge pickup, right? Let's say you're using identical pickups at identical heights, all that stuff. What makes a neck pickup sound warm is that it's further along the string. The sound is brighter near the bridge, which is why you'll see players sometimes do this. They choke up toward the bridge because it gives you a brighter, more aggressive sound. You'll see a lot of like more soulful players will do that to get different tones out of lower gain or mid gain sounds very often, which is cool. It's a really great technique. And then the further away you are, the more toward the middle of the scale, the darker the sound is overall. It's why if you play what's the word I'm looking for? Damn. The opposite, we'll just cheat. I was looking for a better word than that. The opposite of going closer to the bridge with your pick is further from the bridge. There was an interview with Steve Vai where he was like, you know, I came to a point in my career where I realized my tone sucked. And it wasn't my amp. It wasn't my pickups. It wasn't my guitar. It was because I was picking so far up toward the neck that everything sounded muddy and warm and kind of blended together. As soon as I moved my hand back a little bit, the sound opened up and came alive. And like, that's true, right? You play near the bridge, it's bright. You play at a nice middle, you find that thing as part of your style. We're back to the way you approach your picking hand. That stuff affects the sound. You know, you can have the warm, the middle ground, and the bright, where you're, you know. I can hear the difference in those three positions just here. And I'm using a quad cortex through like an FRFR, you know, a wedge, a powered wedge. And like, I can hear the difference just in the room without even trying, not because I'm more skilled than anybody at hearing that stuff, but because it is audible. You can hear the difference. Those things affect the sound, and it all adds up, right? The pickups are a huge part of the sound, which is why specifically if you do a big jump in output or a large change in the construction of the pickup, the actual construction method, you'll see those things that have a big effect on the tone, not just the output. You know, pickups that are wound to be hotter, you can't just make up all that output by raising a lower output pickup closer to the strings. You can make up for a lot of it, but you can't make up for all of it, and the EQ will be affected in the process, which is why certain pickups are built for certain sounds. But I should probably get back to the comments because I'm just starting to rant at this point. Let's see. James, we never discuss how the picks we use affect tone, thickness, material, shape of the picks. So you've hit on something here that I am personally very, I don't want to say embarrassed because I'm not embarrassed about it, but it is something that I focus on a lot. I went through a lot of picks to find the pick that I use, which is a 2mm Dunlop flow pick, in case anyone cares. And it is a tight, bright, grippy tone. Joe plays an Ultex pick. It does not sound the same. D plays a like a lighter, like a thin Fender style celluloid pick. It does not sound the same, even if everything else is the same. Even if you could replicate your picking technique. This is going to sound ridiculous. I don't believe it's on YouTube anymore, but like 15 years ago, I filmed a pick comparison video that I put on my personal YouTube channel where I went from pick to pick, playing through an orange Tiny Terror, the same guitar, same everything, literally just changed picks to hear the sound, and you can so clearly hear the sound difference. The pick you use does have a huge effect on the sound. The harder you hit, you generate more signal, more output, because you're moving the string more. So the signal being picked up by the pickup is more. It's a larger signal. That stuff does impact the way it sounds. The material does impact the way it sounds. All of that stuff matters. The angle at which you hold it affects the sound. Listen to old school Bulb or OG Periphery whenever Misha was playing with his pick reverse like this, where you had that really heavy upstroke, versus now when he corrected, quote unquote, his technique the other way, it's a softer attack sound. It's why when you pick down and then pick up, you get that, I would call it like a metallic sound on the way up. You know, down is warm, up is metallic. And that's because of the way I'm hitting the string with the pick. So yeah, that's a good one. I could go on all day about picks. I am picky about picks. That's an easy one. But it is a big thing. It makes a big difference. And you're right, people don't really talk about it. People mostly play picks for feel, which is the most important part of a pick. But once you know what you like in terms of thickness and point, all of that stuff, sharpness, you should find one that sounds good. Try all the picks that are made that same way. You'll probably find something you like more than what you're using, because they do sound different. So that's a cool one. Good shout out, James. Basilisk, yo, hey, what's up? What's up, Jake? Happy Friday. So hyped after seeing my growler on that promo pick. Yeah, dude, not long now. And it's a sick build. So get stoked. Dave, I like a nice thick pick personally. Me too. I don't like a pick to flex. I feel like I'm more accurate with a thicker pick that doesn't bend at all. That's just a personal thing. When I'm playing, like in my right hand, I feel like I feel every note with a thicker pick. Sometimes, like if I'm playing acoustic, I want a little bit of give because that thick pick can be too aggressive and too bright, and I want a little more blend in the sound. But yeah, that's a good point. Mario, with signal chain effects, high gain, etc., tone wood change is minimal. Where it makes the most difference is in the feel. Holding the guitar, you feel the sustain, the vibration, and that affects your playing. This is a really good point. Yes, you are right. Typically, as the gain goes up and things get buried in a mix, every factor in your tone gets reduced because it then becomes part of a larger whole. Not just is the guitar, not just are the guitar, the pickups, the amp, not just is each one of those individual things a part of the whole that is your guitar tone, but then your tone is the part of a whole that is the mix of a song or a live jam or whatever. And all of those things get minimized. Anytime you mix things, it gets minimized. It's one of the reasons why I really like clear mixes. And by clear, I don't mean like sterile or bright. I just mean I like when I can really hear the bass, the guitar, the drums. I don't like anything to be buried in the mix because I think everyone works hard to make that sound great and it all contributes to part of the sound. That's why I love a three-piece band so much, because there's nowhere to hide. All of the tones are like doing what they're supposed to do when they're done well, and it makes for a huge sound. But that is a good shout, and I agree. I do think that there are differences, and you hit on another thing that's a good point. There are differences in like the vibration depending on the wood type. If the wood is denser, if the wood has a higher moisture content, you know, if you go, there's a reason that playing an alder body guitar doesn't feel like playing a mahogany body guitar. Like when I say feel like, I mean when it's in your lap, the resonance is different. The acoustic sustain, back to Kai's point, is different. And those things do matter. There have been a couple of famous guitar players over the years who have said, yeah, you know, I pick up a guitar. I think Joe Walsh was one of them. Pick up a guitar, I play these couple of chords because I know how I want those chords to resonate in my hand. You know, I've played guitars that do it well, and when I play guitars that don't resonate in the same way, the only reason I'm going to pick that guitar is because I want something different. Which is, I think, genius, because not only is he acknowledging the differences, but he's also acknowledging that it also doesn't matter. It's totally subjective. You know, a Strat doesn't feel like a Tele, doesn't feel like a Les Paul, doesn't feel like a Balaguer. You know, if you're talking about the stereotypical builds of those guitars, and the reason is in the design first off, and in the wood choices. Not even plugging the guitar in, you will feel those differences. Dave, I like thick pick. We already hit that one. Dylan, construction, I feel, plays a bigger role than the wood. Neck through versus set neck versus bolt on, hollow body, solid body, carved top, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's a good point. And those things do make a difference. If you were to play two guitars, one semi-hollow or hollow and one solid, in fact, you could do all three. If you had a solid body guitar, a semi-hollow, and a fully hollow guitar, and they were all identical in all of their spec, except for the hollowness of the inside, they would all sound different. They would all feel different. I know because I've done it, and anyone who's done it will tell you the same thing. They're clearly going to vibrate differently. You will feel the difference. And I'm not even talking about the acoustic sound difference. Even recorded, they will sound different. As you go more towards a hollow guitar, the sound gets woollier, warmer, moves more air. It's why if you play one of our Espada Limiteds and then you play one of our Espada Ambients, even if you swapped the same pickups into both guitars and made the bridges the same and made them the same woods, they would not sound the same, because it does make a difference in the way that the sound is. Things like bolt-on, set neck, and neck through also make a difference. They tend to... while I don't think it plays a bigger role than the wood itself, in my opinion, I do think that as you go from bolt-on to set neck to neck through, I think there are two main things to consider. One, the sound is going to get warmer, all things being equal, as you go from one to the next. Bolt-on is the snappiest and the brightest. Set neck is going to be a little warmer than that. Neck through is typically a little warmer than that if you're keeping all the woods the same and not changing anything. For instance, mahogany neck, mahogany body, right? Set neck is going to be slightly brighter. Bolt-on is going to be slightly brighter. Set neck is going to be slightly warmer than that. Neck through, because you just have a big chunk of mahogany going through in a mahogany body, so you haven't changed the wood composition a whole lot. The one place where neck through gets interesting, and it's a personal preference of mine, is if you have a maple neck and a mahogany body, when you go for bolt-on and set neck, the amount of maple is not changing. The amount of mahogany is not changing. Mostly. We're talking very small percents if the neck pocket is carved different or something like that. But when you go neck through, you're then replacing a chunk of mahogany from the body with an extended piece of maple. So you are changing the wood by volume of the guitar, which does affect the sound. Personally, my favorite wood combo is a mahogany body with a neck through roasted maple neck, because I like that the maple neck through takes out some of the lower mids and the bass of the mahogany and adds in a little more clarity and a little more brightness. We're not talking about 50% of the sound here. We're talking less than 10%. But to me, if I go from playing a bolt-on guitar that has a maple neck and a mahogany body to a neck through guitar that has a maple neck and a mahogany body, because you're changing not only the amount of wood, but also the construction method. That difference is quite audible. And if you were to hear it in the same room, even with everything else being equal on the guitar, you would hear the difference. And you would certainly feel the difference in the way the guitar vibrates. So, you know, that's an interesting one. And I like that one. We're getting like super deep into it with that one, which I like. Because like we say, everything affects the sound. It's all some of its parts. And it's fun. Mario says 100%. Yep. Jean-Luca, yo, what's up? Thanks for dropping in. XLJ says, can you list which woods are commonly considered as the tone woods? Yes, I can. So I would say the most common tone woods are the woods that have been used the longest. They sort of become standard because I think everyone's ears have become accustomed to them over time. Body woods are going to be alder, ash, and mahogany. Those are going to be the top three. And really, alder and mahogany are like the vast majority of guitars for a very long time. Electric guitars were made of alder, mahogany, or ash. That's electric guitars, electric basses. Most of the time, those are the three main woods. Other riffs on that you see somewhat often, especially in acoustics, you might see something like spruce. You might see like rosewood is a more common wood, like a tone wood in the body of an acoustic guitar than it would be for an electric. But I would say the most common are going to be alder, ash, and mahogany. And those are also the three most popular that we see when we build stuff. Those are the three most popular body woods ordered. And they all feel and sound different. Not only are their weights different, but they're different densities. They grow in different conditions. The resonance is different and the tone is different. You know, alder is a very clear sound, but it's almost like a mid scoop. You don't have a big mid bump. It's got a good amount of low end, a good amount of high end, and it's tight. I would say ash is in the middle. Ash has even more clarity than alder, but is a flatter EQ, which is why a lot of modern metal guitarists like ash guitars, because not just because rustic finishes look sick, which are very often done on ash guitars, but because ash is a flat EQ, but it's very clear. So you can push that EQ in different directions if you want a super heavy like fat sound, or if you want a super bright cutting sound. It's kind of easier to push that wood in multiple directions. I would say it's more versatile. Again, that's a personal preference thing. I tend to prefer ash to alder. Again, just personal preference. I tend to prefer mahogany over both of them because mahogany gives you a lot of low mid content, mid content. It's a warmer wood. It's become cliche for a lot of reasons, but if you play a Strat and you play a Les Paul, you know, Les Pauls are often known as being fat, mid-rangey, lots of low end, lots of power. Strats are clearer, snappier, funkier. That's the sum of the parts that we've been talking about. One's bolt-on, one's set neck, one's alder, one's mahogany, one's got a maple neck, one's got a mahogany neck. One's a longer scale length, one's a shorter scale length. I'm sure someone will drop scale length in here, and we'll talk about that and how it affects tone as well. But like all of that stuff adds up to make a very different sounding guitar, and not least of all the pickups, of course, right? I mean, you've got single coil pickups, traditionally in a Strat, and humbuckers in a Les Paul. You know, if you take those two guitars, very classic spec guitars, and then compare them to something more modern, let's say a Balaguer Mitch 6, right? Ash body, 28-inch scale, 6-string, with an Evertune bridge, set neck. All of those things affect the tone. It's going to sound way more modern because it's built to be, it's designed to be, it's spec'd to be. And that's, I personally like to do that. The specs that I choose on my own guitars, I like them to lean into the sound that I'm going for. Sometimes people will go for a middle of the road thing because they want to push it in different directions, and that's okay. Versatility. Some people try and make it do one thing really, really well, which is sort of where I lean and what I like to do. But again, totally subjective. But that's a good point, and it is cool. And those are sort of the most common tone woods. For bodies, it's going to be alder, ash, and mahogany. For necks, it's going to be maple, mahogany, really maple and mahogany. Those are the main two. Wenge has become very popular over the last 10 years or so, which sounds different. Maple is warm and clear. Mahogany is warm and slightly less clear, but has a little more of a like softness to it, less dense, more like a softer sound that accentuates the mids just like it does in the body. And then Wenge is like the snap and clarity of maple, but without as much of the warmth. So it's a very like clear, dense wood. It's got a very tight sound. Some people don't like it because they say it's too tight or too almost has such a flat EQ and is mostly just snap. Doesn't have a lot of impart on the sound. I tend to think that's true. Wenge looks sick. It sounds very clear. It's difficult to work on. Dangerous actually in some cases. So if you have a Wenge neck, don't go shaving it off without looking stuff up first. But it is, those are probably the 3 most popular neck woods that we see. And then fingerboard woods, again, typically maple or rosewood or ebony. Those are the 3 big ones. So some combination of alder, mahogany, or ash body with a maple or mahogany or Wenge neck with a maple or ebony or rosewood fingerboard. Some combination of those 9 specs are going to make up like 99% of guitars. And they all sound different. It's not just one or the other. None of them act in isolation. They all combine to make something cool. That's a good question though. Kai says you can press your guitar up against the table while you play and you'll hear it significantly amplifies as it resonates to the table. Yes, that's true. What's interesting is anytime you touch anything with anything that vibrates, the vibration is not only amplified, but also not only amplified, but also modified. So you're essentially combining the resonance of 2 different things. The thing that you started the vibration with, that you're putting the force into, like the guitar, will typically have more effect overall. So it might be like a 60-40 split or a 70-30 split. But that's a cool tip. And I've seen people do that, put their guitar down, strum it to get everything to sort of amplify, which is a cool trick. And it's fun to do. And you will hear the difference in the vibration as well as feel it. Will, yo, technique is in the fingers, tone is in your gear, with all due respect. I appreciate the respect. And you're 99% right. You know, I agree with you. Generally, your technique and your style and your feel and, you know, the way all of that affects the sound is in your fingers. And tone is mostly in your gear. But your touch does affect your tone. And your tone, you know, does affect the way that you play. So there is some overlap there. There's a bit of a Venn diagram. But I do agree with you generally. Dave says, Steve Vai always sounds like Steve Vai. Yeah, it's true. No one can play the Lydian mode like Steve Vai. Just like no one can play Dorian like Joe Satriani. And no one can play harmonic minor like Imbe, right? Part of the touch and the style is how you choose to play the guitar and the sounds that you reach for. That's part of why they always sound like themselves. But yes, having the inspiration, the touch, the style, the development, the feel, you can put those people on any rig and they're going to sound like themselves. Totally agree. Dylan says, so Jake, I like this. This is like letter format. That makes me happy. So Jake, do you typically consider tone woods when during your build, or is your focus more geared towards visual aesthetics? So I always start with tone woods because I want, like I said a minute ago, I tend to focus on guitars that do a specific thing really well. The downside of that is you have to have multiple guitars. Have to have multiple guitars. That's what I tell myself anyway. So if I'm building a guitar to play modern metal, I want it to be some balance of the tones that I've always liked with the fact that I want it to be a modern metal machine. I want it to be tight, articulate, harmonically rich, you know, so that you can get like the scrapes and the pinch harmonics and the squeals out of it. You know, having a harmonically rich foundation with clear tones that push that stuff off the fingerboard, make it easier to do. That's why people say some guitars, oh yeah, the harmonics leap off the guitar, because certain woods and strings and pickups, the whole thing, make that sound. You know, if you're playing certain builds, they will feel easier to do that with. I had a revelation like 8 years ago when I got my second Balaguer, which was an Axmus deal. I don't know if anyone remembers that. And it was a single bridge pickup, ash-bodied thicket. It was the first ash-bodied guitar I'd ever owned. Ferrule bridge pickup, ebony board, roasted maple neck. And that guitar had so much clarity, so much percussive attack that I was like, I was taken aback. I mean, it was truly a special sounding guitar, and it's floating out there somewhere. It was a red one with a black pick guard, and it was super sick. And I fell in love with ash for guitars in a way that I had not before that day when I first played that guitar. And they do make a big impact. So I tend to spec it specifically. What I've found is, you know, as I go higher gain and more modern, I want more clarity. So for instance, I'm going to lean into like a roasted maple neck with like a rich light board, because both of those things provide clarity and snap. And then the body, I want that tone to be balanced out with some lows and some mids. So I'm usually looking again at like a neck through roasted maple neck with a rich light board and a mahogany body. That is sort of the general sound that I go for anything. Well, for almost anything, because I kind of just like that sound the best, but especially for the stuff that I normally do. If I was going for something super modern, I might swap the mahogany for ash to get even more clarity. And if I was going more vintage, I might swap the rich light board with roasted bird's eye maple or something that has some warmth to it. Not only because it looks sick, but also, or roasted flame maple, not only because it looks sick, but because it's warmer than ebony or rich light. So I typically start there, and then I build the aesthetic. You know, there are all sorts of tricks to that. For instance, let's say, I mean, you look at classic Les Pauls, there's a reason there's a maple cap on a Les Paul. It's not just because it looks good, it's because it balances out the tone. You have a mahogany neck and a mahogany body. It's very mahogany. It's deep, warm, low mids, but as a result, it can lack clarity, especially with a shorter scale length. It can lack clarity, and adding that maple cap, which was something that Les Paul, the player, did intentionally to add clarity to the sound, to balance everything out. It came from acoustic guitars and you know, box guitars, where the way the top wood was often different than the sides and the back. That's where that idea comes from, but it does a similar thing where it creates a different resonance and a different tone. So I typically start with the woods that I want. Then I'll evolve from there into the aesthetic. Almost never do they clash. Sometimes they do, and I'll have to decide and make a sacrifice. But you know, like we said earlier, it's a sum of its parts, so and everything kind of happens by volume. So it's easier to sacrifice, let's say, the way a fingerboard looks for the way that it sounds, because it has less of an impact on the overall tone, versus a body wood or a neck wood, much more important to me because they have a larger impact on the overall sound. Same thing with pickups. That's a good question though. Will, speaker and mic setup. Look at how drastically the tone changes as you flip through. It's one huge equation. Everything will impact the tone, even the room you're playing in. Absolutely. The studio space here, high ceilings, makes things feel completely different than it does at the old shop where we were in a small room with low ceilings. All of that stuff affects not just like the way you perceive the sound, but the way the sound is recorded. You know, I think similar to picks, which I think are often overlooked as an impact on your tone, I think cabs are often overlooked. Everyone talks about amps and guitars. Cabs don't get the love they deserve. The difference between that orange cab and that Mesa cab, even though they both have British-made V30s in them, is like ridiculous. You may as well, if you blindfolded me and played both of these cabs, A-B'd them, I'd think you had changed rigs completely, even if everything else was the same. The sound is that different. It's a very different sound. So yeah, that's also a good point. And yes, it is all part of a larger equation, absolutely. And then that's not even talking about mics, like you're saying. The way that you mic a cab dramatically. Anyone who's ever just stuck an SM57 in different places on a speaker or watched a video of someone doing it, the sound difference is gigantic. Even just moving a speaker, moving a mic 2 inches on a speaker dramatically changes the sound, which is why I think the producers that I like the most, side note, and engineers that I like the most are the ones that start with a great sound. And there are players like this too. You start with something is great. And then if it doesn't sound the way you want it to once it's recorded, it's not the rig. It's the recording technique or the mic or the placement. But all of that adds up to make a great sound. Petrucci's an easy example. John Petrucci, guitarist of Dream Theater, because the dude's famous for having amazing tone. I've seen him live 6 or 7 times now, both in his solo stuff and in Dream Theater. And I've been on the stage more than once, and I'm hearing the cab, not the front of house sound in some cases, and it sounds amazing. And then when I'm back away and I hear the front of house sound, the PA, it also sounds amazing because he's starting with an amazing tone and then just amplifying it for everybody. Whether that's in the studio or live, all of that stuff holds, and it is all an important part of the sound. So that's a good one, Will, and you're absolutely right. Mario says, clear your calendar. This discussion might go on all weekend. It might, and it's worthy of a full weekend of discussion because it is important. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick break, because that was a good comment, Mario, to riff a little bit and give my voice a break, and then we'll hop back into it. All right. Whew, got that out of my system. I don't know why I was in a covers mood there. I was just kind of ripping through whatever inspired me in the moment. But yeah, good stuff. This, by the way, is a Hyperion. Some people have asked about this guitar. This is one of the guitars we did for Fluff back in the day. This is one of Joe's personal Hyperions, kind of like the Silverburst one that he likes to play. It's got a ferrule set in it, so ferrule neck pickup, ferrule bridge pickup, Balaguer, ferrule neck pickup, and bridge pickup. Fun purple knobs. D, our resident Cherubian QC tech, did an amazing job on this one, and it's fun to play. I don't often get to play in standard, so I'm kind of like just on that train. Yeah, woo, riffing. Boy, it's hot in here. It's so freaking hot outside. I'm sweating. Not that everyone needed to know that, but you know. Let's see. If you're playing in a room with hardwood floors, yeah, for sure. Definitely changes it. Kai, I wish all the guitars sounded good unplugged as my Espada does. As good. Yeah, you know, the resonance of a guitar is tough because there are ways you can make it more consistent. For instance, if you're getting roasted maple, it's typically more consistent because the moisture content's more controlled. Even if the maple itself is different from blank to blank, it sort of helps to keep it consistent. But every piece of wood's different. Every tree is different. Everything is different. A lot of times, even if you're going from like two pieces of wood that are the same species, if one came from an area where they got lots of water and one came from an area where it did not get lots of water, it will affect the density of the grain, which affects the resonance. And yeah, it's kind of like, I have some guitars that are just good guitars. Like they feel right. They vibrate the way they should. That's a thing. I have some guitars that aren't. None of them are Balagers, of course. But there are, you can put too much finish on a guitar and kill the vibration. That's why we use thinner finishes, not so thin that it's a problem, but thinner finishes, because the resonance is important, and you can kill the resonance of a guitar with too thick a finish. Going from one piece of wood to the next, some just have different characteristics. It's not better or worse. You can have two Balagers built to the exact same spec, and they will feel slightly different because of the wood used and the micro things that add up to a slight difference. But yeah, it definitely does have an impact. Dave, down the rabbit hole we go. Oh yeah, baby. We're all the way down the rabbit hole. Dragonheart picks. Oh yeah, Dragonheart stuff's rad. Good shout. Dylan says picking location along the scale length also plays a huge role. Yeah, we kind of touched on this earlier, and it definitely does. As you go brighter near the bridge to slightly warmer, like let's say in the middle of the pickups, to slightly warmer still, like over the neck pickup, you hear those differences more in, which was something that Will was saying earlier, I think. You hear those differences more in lower and mid gain scenarios, but even in high gain, you hear the difference. I did it earlier, doing this thing. Those all sound different in the room. I know it's not going to come through as well here because I didn't switch to the actual guitar mics, but you can hear the difference. I can hear the difference in the room. Sounds like Dean Zielinski's Z-Glide neck. Oh, the hollow necks. Yeah, I actually really like the Z-Glide neck. I think it's fun. It's interesting because you're balancing friction against the ability of small gaps in the neck to grip your skin. So that you're reducing the friction by touching less of the neck, right? But you're also gripping the edges that are created in the process. So to me anyway, for a satin neck, I don't really feel the difference, but when they gloss them, I do. It's very cool. I think it looks sick, and I just kind of like the way it feels. It's almost like getting a hand massage while you're playing. I like it. Dave says multi-scale is clearly the best. Yeah, so multi-scale definitely, that's a good transition into scale length, right? Scale length does affect the tone as well, not just in the register. Obviously, it has to be balanced out with the gauges and the tuning and everything else. Like we've said, it's a sum of its parts. But multi-scale does um, affect the tone. A longer scale length at the top, a shorter scale length at the bottom. If you were to take a 27-inch guitar and a 25.5-inch guitar, and then a multi-scale 27 to 25.5-inch guitar, and they're all identical in every other way, magically, you would hear a difference in playing the low notes on the 25 compared to the 27-inch, and you would hear a difference in the high notes on the 27 compared to the 25, because the scale length affects the resonance of the string. It affects the tension of the string and the way that it vibrates over the pickup, which, as we've discussed, as we've discussed in today's lecture, which, as we mentioned earlier, does affect the signal, what's actually generated by the pickup when it detects the vibration of the string. All those things do matter, and multi-scale and scale lengths in general do impact the sound. It's why bass sixes sound bassy, not just because they have thick strings and are tuned to E1. You could put light strings on a 30-inch scale guitar and match the tension of a 25.5-inch scale guitar and tune them both to the same tuning. They're not going to sound the same. Not just because the string sizes are different, but because of the scale length. Both of those things have a huge impact on the sound. So that's a good one too. And that was a solid segue. You got me there. An Espada with a Wingate body, Dylan says. Yeah. I don't think, I have to confirm with Joe, I don't think we've ever done a Wingate body. I don't even know if I've ever played a guitar with a solid Wingate body. I'd be curious. I'm not super hopeful, because and that's a personal thing, just because I'm not big on Wingate tonally. It feels fine. I'm not big on the resonance, and I'm not big on the tone personally. Again, not a knock on it. I just prefer other things. So I have low hopes personally, but someone who wanted snap and clarity and a density in the sound and a very clean sound, even under high gain, that would be a great choice. And I bet it would be someone's signature sound for sure. Maybe yours. Dylan. Kai says, stoked to see the Bernax Hyperion come out. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff floating around. You never know. Just gonna see if Jake has a mini aneurysm when he hears these words. Parallelogram cut bare knuckle pickups. Yeah, canceled immediately. Giving me PTS over here. No, it's a cool idea. We've been chatting offline about multi-scale guitar. The reason the pickups are slanted is because you want the magnet under each string, the pole piece under each string, to read the string at the best sounding point along its scale, which is why they get tilted, because you have a longer scale length here. It's similar to why Strats have a slanted bridge pickup, is because they wanted half of the pickup to sound brighter than the other half or warmer than the other half. That's intentional, and it does look sick too. And multi-scale is the same way. That's where that comes from. So what we've been talking about is the idea that you could cut the bobbins of a multi-scale pickup where they were a parallelogram, so two parallel sides. Instead of the edges of the pickup being rotated, they would be parallel to the strings, which is a cool idea. I think it looks sick. It looks very square peg in a square hole. It's like mentally satisfying. Got to get that serotonin, you know? Yo! Das Katzen. Yes. With a sick build in the cube, by the way. IMO, speakers have the greatest effect on the tone. Also, when recording, the tone goes through a tremendous amount of EQ and processing to fit in the mix. That's true. And I do think that speakers, if you look at the total signal chain from your hand to the console, the speakers are one of the largest contributing factors, and definitely using the same cab but changing amps will have a smaller impact on the tone than using the same head and changing cabs with different speakers in them. It's a huge tonal difference. And we said earlier, it doesn't get the love it deserves. Cabs, I mean, don't get the love they deserve for being such a huge part on the, such a huge part of the tone. So that's a good shout. And you're also right. Once it's recorded and it's in the desk, whether even back in the day when it was on tape, that stuff gets mixed and mastered. Nothing ever, almost no record ever in the history of the world has, certainly in modern times, has been recorded without any post-processing on it, which all that is the mixing and mastering process. It makes sure that everything is heard, everything is clear, everything is not blended, but everything sits on a bed together, equal levels, compression, all of that stuff. All of those things affect the EQ of the sound and the tone. But there's a reason that certain things happen in front of the amp and certain things happen after the amp. There's a reason that studio compressors don't sound the same as pedal board compressors, because you're putting them in a different place in the chain and they affect the signal and the EQ differently. But that is a good point, and it is true. Jesse, the live stream is, what's up? Is at least 8% better whenever a high period is involved. Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear you say that, friend. Then mastering changes it again, so I find it more important to just find a guitar that I love the feel of playing. The tone will sort itself out via the studio. That's fair. Of course, playing live also has its own challenges. Yes, also true. And that's true. A lot of players do that. They just want something that inspires them. They don't really care. They're not like going for a sound. They play something. If it inspires them and it feels good, they can figure the rest out. And that is the flip side of doing something to intentionally fit a certain sound. And they are equally valid. I can't be clear enough about that. There are some guitars that I own not because I built them to be the way I wanted them to be, but because when I played them, they inspired me to do a certain thing or feel a certain way or play a certain way. And the best example of that I can give is back in the day when I used to give lessons and stuff. A lot of beginner players are like, what guitar should I buy? Like, not just to learn on, but especially when you get to the intermediate level, what should I buy? But when younger players are doing that, hey, a parent, I want to get my kid a guitar. They want to play guitar. What should I get them? I would literally say, start by walking into a guitar store and have them pick out the one they think looks the coolest. That's what's going to make you want to play. It is an important part of the equation. Not to do with tone necessarily, but definitely important. A guitar that makes you want to play when you look at it will always have a leg up on a guitar that doesn't. A guitar that inspires you with its resonance, even if the woods aren't what you think you might like or aren't typical woods, whatever it does to inspire you, that's just as valid as saying, oh, I built this thing to be the tonal machine that I want it to be. They're totally equal and valid, and equally valid. I think of like Ariel Posen playing like old plastic guitars, or Jack White playing old plastic guitars. Those guitars suck to play. They don't stay in tune. They're impossible to intonate. They're all over the place. The pickups aren't wax potted and they feedback like crazy. Like, there are some objective things about those guitars that make them inferior. But if subjectively they inspire you and you can crank a fuzz through it and it makes this nasty ass tone that you love and feeds back like crazy, and you like that battle of fighting the feedback, you like heavy strings, you like things that make you play a certain way but also affect the tone, but you only care about the fact that they make you play and feel a certain way, that is arguably even more important than the way that, it's not arguably, it is more important than the way that it sounds, because what makes you want to play, what inspires you, is the key. That's why we do this. No one, and I mean literally no one, plays guitar only for the tone. Tone can inspire you, but no one plays just for that. You play because you love music or because it inspires you or whatever. I'm not trying to get too lofty about it, but that is the key stuff. And you're absolutely right. If you play something and it inspires you, you should play that. If it sounds like absolute ass, you should still play that if it inspires you, because you will find something unique there. And that's cool. That's also style. That's also touch. All that stuff that we've talked about in this whole live stream come together there in a really cool, unique, and different way than like purpose building a custom guitar to do what you want it to do. And they're equally awesome and should be celebrated. All of it should be celebrated. So that's a cool point. I like it. The aesthetic, Jake, true story though. And it is important. It just is. Pentagonal peg in a pentagonal hole. Dave, sometimes I think we're brothers from another mother. Will, by the way, I almost forgot to ask, did you get the glass picks I sent? I don't know if you remember, but I make them. Yeah, I do remember, but I don't have them. That's odd now that you mention it. Follow up with me after this live stream because I wasn't sure if you sent them because I didn't get them. Unless Joe got them and didn't tell me, which I don't think would be a thing. I think he would have told me. But especially if it was that long ago, Will, shoot me an email. Seriously. Cole, in your experience, how much does the weight of a piece of wood matter to the sound? Swamp ash seems to vary and can be very light or a little heavier, same with mahogany. Yeah. I think, to me, wood that is too light, or let's say lighter wood resonates different than heavier wood, even if it's the same species of wood. A light piece of ash does not feel the same to play as a heavy piece of ash. And that comes down to the grain structure, the density of the wood itself. Even if it's from the same tree, but a different part of the tree, or two trees in the same wood, meaning like the woods. They are from the same area of the same swamp, if it's swamp ash. They're right by each other, but one's on a high piece of, piece of marsh, and the other's like in a bog. They're gonna be different in their densities because of the moisture content and the way that they grew, and they will feel different. Personally, I like the middle ground. Sounds kind of a cop-out, but I think if a wood is too dense, it resonates densely. Like it feels very compact. The resonance is boxy almost. And then if it's too light, I feel like it's kind of like too zingy, too bright. It's too open and all over the place. And it's like too active in a way that I feel is kind of overwhelming. Again, disclaimer, total personal preference. I promised I would disclaim any of my personal preferences. Total personal preference. Some people like a super light piece of wood because they like how lively it is. They like that openness. They like that feel and sound. Some people like super heavy stuff because they like that density. They want it to feel like they're like pushing through something when the guitar is resonating. And that's cool too. Personally, most of the time, I honestly sit right in the middle. If I had to go one way or the other, it would really depend on the guitar itself, but I probably naturally lean a little toward the heavier side. Those things, as you go from a lighter to heavier piece of the same species, the tone is very, very similar. The difference is mostly going to be in the feel, in the resonance, and the way that those things translate. But that's a good question. The rule of cool, I like it. That's why I like to go through you guys and bare knuckle together the aesthetic possibilities. Yeah, for sure. Will says, I did. I'll send another batch. Not a problem at all. Damn. Seriously. Also, like, send me any info, like tracking or anything like that. I don't know how we missed that, if it shows us delivered or if it got here. We do, BG HQ is in a shared business park. Sometimes things get lost, although I would hope not, but that is a thing. Dave, I prefer wood from the arse of the tree. Fair enough. You got to get that booty wood. You know what I'm saying? Got to get that big booty wood. Yeah. Thick booty wood. Thick with 2 C's. It's all personal preference. And I think as we look towards wrapping up, that's really, I even have it written down right here on the whiteboard of truth that we use to make sure we're not too off track for the live stream, which is, it's all subjective and it's all the sum of its parts. So literally anything you do to a guitar, binding versus no binding, types of tuners, string gauges and tunings and tension, the bridge, the pickups, the body woods, the electronics, the length of your cable, the type of amp, the type of cab, the length of the speaker cable from your amp to your cab, the mic you put on that cab, where that mic is placed on that cab, the length of the cable from the mic to the mic pre or to the DAW, or interface rather. The room, whether it's carpeted or not, everything affects the way the guitar sounds and feels. Hell, you could go so far as to say, as we mentioned, the aesthetic makes a difference. It makes you want to play different. You will sound different because of the way that a certain guitar affects your touch. And it inspires or doesn't inspire you to do or not do certain things. So positive closure at the end of this is the next time anyone's on a forum or in the Balaguer discussion group and people start freaking out about this stuff, because they will, they always will. People need a hill to die on. Just know it's all subjective, first off. That's the part where I say none of this matters. It all matters and none of it matters because it's all subjective. It's all about what inspires you. That's the goal. That's why we build these guitars. That's why we offer so many options. It would be so easy for us to offer just 3 neck woods, 3 body woods, and 3 fretboard woods and be done with it. But whether it's because of the aesthetic or the tone, we try to give as many choices as is feasible because we think that's important, because you should be able to make something look and sound the way you want it to look and sound. And it's a special thing. I think it's a big part of the reason why people, why our community is so awesome. And shout out to everyone who's in the chat, because it's because of conversations like this and guys and gals like y'all that we're able to keep doing what we do, because us being able to do something as cool as build something that is so important to people inspirationally, but build it the way they want it is very special. We're very grateful. And I don't often speak for Joe. I don't often speak for people in general. I like people to speak for themselves. But I'll speak for Joe even though he's not here. He feels the same way. It's just an awesome thing to be able to do. And if you ever hung up on any of this stuff, email us. If you have a specific question, email us. info@balaguerguitars.com. Get in the Balaguer Facebook discussion group, the BGFBDG. We're always talking about tone woods and pickups and builds and what everyone's doing, finishes and all that stuff in there. You can ask questions in there. It's a great community. It's not like these other places where you're going to get flamed for, not knowing the difference between all or no one cares what you know or don't know. Everyone's just there to help. And it's a cool place to be. You can ask questions there. You can ask questions at the info email. You can find us wherever we are and ask those questions, and we will answer them. Don't ever be afraid to ask. There are no stupid questions about this stuff. I've often made the comparison of knowing what all of this stuff adds up to for every different guitar. It's like being a sommelier. You can't know what a wine tastes like until you taste it. People can describe it, but you have to taste it. Guitars, it's the experience of hearing them all, playing them all, knowing what different wood combos sound like, what they feel like, the resonance, the EQ, what affects the tone and what doesn't, pickups, everything about it. We don't impress those opinions on people. We just share the experience so that you can build whatever you want to get you where you want to get, to inspire you. And I think that's a pretty solid note to end on. So I'm going to burn through some of these last few comments. I'm going to riff for a little bit, and then I'm going to shut it down because it's Friday, and I'm sweating like a pig in here, and I am ready to not sweat for at least a minute before I have to walk outside. So thanks, everyone, for joining Friday live stream. We do this every other Friday, 2:30 p.m. right here on the YouTube channel, the Balaguer Guitars YouTube channel. Like, comment, subscribe. Almost missed it. And yeah, I hope everyone has a killer weekend. It's the weather is shaping up in a lot of places. So if you're into the outdoors, I hope you do something fun. If you're not, I hope you're jamming. I know I'm looking forward to playing some Night Rain. Big Elden Ring fan, big FromSoft fan. So gonna get some of that on. And I hope everyone, like I said, has a great weekend. We will talk soon. That booty wood. Even the setup makes a difference. Absolutely true. Really enjoyed listening in. Thanks, y'all. Gianluca, so good to hear from you, dude. And I hope you're doing well. None of it matters, but all of it matters. Put it on a t-shirt. Balaguer is the only tone that matters. Mario, you've had my back from day one. I appreciate it. Have a good weekend, Jake. Thank you. And I'm going to riff a little bit, and then I'm going to head out. Thanks again, everyone, for hanging out. Hope everyone has a killer weekend. Get you that tone. Get you that booty wood.